All right, so I'm going to call the Capital Planning Committee - School Research Subcommittee to order for February 9th, 2022. It is 12:33 p.m. The only agenda item we have is to discuss the presentation. So, Katura, I'll let you go first and see if there's any edits that you wanted to discuss or clarification you want to discuss in advance of this evening.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I thought it actually looked great. I guess my only tiny, this is just more like a formatting thing in a way, but on, you know how we start on page 5 and slide 5, start giving details about the subcommittee. Do we want to just call it the subcommittee throughout? Because sometimes I feel like if we refer to it as the committee, then I start thinking, wait, is that the capital planning committee? It's like, do you know what I mean? So on the left where it's like, how did this committee come into existence, and then committee charge? I don't know, is there, but is that technically right that it's actually a committee, even though it's a subcommittee?
It is a committee and it is a subcommittee. It's both.
Yeah, okay. If it's technically right, then I'm fine with it. I keep seeing it and thinking, wait, what are we talking about here? And then I go over, but I think maybe that's just me. So
my suggestion, I think, is a great one. I will do a control F through the document after the meeting and change any reference to committee to sub, unless it refers to actually the school committee or the full capital planning committee. That way it's referring really to the actions of the three of us and no one else.
okay, that's great. Thank you. I just think that's clearer. And I looked at the slides, the scenario slides that I think Greg sent. And I just want to throw out there, I really like the way this is arranged now. I think it's really helpful to have it as D1, D2, and D3. And D3 now explicitly represents sort of the where we arrived as a scenario, like a moving forward scenario, after he gave the presentation of the other scenarios in the fall at the school committee meeting. So I think this is very helpful. And I thought that looked great. I think the funding slide looks really good, and the recommendations, I thought it all looked really good. So thank you for all this work on it. It's beautiful.
I appreciate the comment, because as I started to redo it, I'm like, oh, this looks so much better. Because I think it was your comment the other day. So
Yeah.
I'm going to pause for a second. Greg literally just called me, so I don't know if he's trying again. Let me just make sure he doesn't having access issues. So just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Katura, can you hear me?
I can.
I mean, we're still a committee, or we're still a quorum. So,
Yep.
And I'll say this with Jason back too. I don't see why we need D2. To me, that's confusing. That's one that doesn't use a 10% increase. I don't see why we're doing that one. I agree. D1 and D3 are great, but I don't see why we've got D2 in there.
Oh, interesting. Let me see.
Every other one has the 10% in there, except we've thrown this one in there. And I just don't know why we're throwing it in there.
So first, Greg is going to be joining us in a moment. I'm just troubleshooting getting him a link. But to answer your question, I'm not wed to this, Kathy, but the reason it went in there in the first place was to answer the question of, before we added the scenario of grade 2 going to NERI as well, there was a question, if you look at D1, all the yellow on Finn, and D2 was added merely to show that Finn really doesn't have a capital need unless the projections are off by a lot. So it really wasn't in there to focus on necessarily where the attention is right now, which is NERI, but more towards the Finn needs in someone asking a question on, why isn't Finn also in need of capital doing this, and is that the right answer? That was the main rationale behind why we developed that slide in the first place was because of all the yellow on D1 for Finn.
I was originally thinking that it was because it just answers the question of, could we today, even temporarily, just move everybody into 3 buildings? And do you know what I mean? Even if we're not thinking about enrollment in 10 years and going forward, and even so, it doesn't work even today. But
So Katura
but
is
your
just
point is
proving my
like
point. It's
excellent.
not clear why this is here, and I had a third reason. So the 3 of us have different reasons for this to be in here. I just think it's going to, I mean, you can answer what you just said if it comes up. I don't think it will come up. I just think someone's gonna go, wait a minute. They're gonna say, first of all, what's the difference between, they're gonna have to then get into the footnote. I just think because all the other ones include the 10%, that this one should be left out, but I'm 1 vote of 3.
I would be totally fine taking it out as long as Katura highlights when we go through D1 that Finn is only yellow by a few numbers, a few people, right? Like that was, and this is using a worst case scenario. So we really don't anticipate that Finn would actually have a yellow unless really the worst case happens in terms of Southborough school enrollment.
I
So
think that's a
Greg,
much better idea.
Greg, we're talking about the slide that has analysis of scenario D2 about why that's in there, because it uses the original, it doesn't have the 10% buffer. And Jason and I both came up with different reasons, and I think Kathy had a theory too about why we might present this, but maybe we don't need it because and I see what you're saying, Kathy. I think it does maybe distract a little from the trajectory of the information that we're presenting.
So I still vote for you doing exactly what Jason just said. You explaining when you get to D1 that it's not yellow by many students in a lot of those boxes. But I wouldn't use the worst case scenario phrase that Jason did. I'd say, I call these is cushion numbers. I don't think it's worst case. I mean, it could be
Right.
worse. So I wouldn't use worst case scenario because we don't know
Fair.
what the worst case scenario. So I'd use cushion numbers. We're using a cushion here. We took RLS and then we cushioned it.
And I think
Okay.
Greg is going to speak to the actual charts since he did that presentation before and is very adept at explaining the charts.
So basically, I just want to make sure I'm looking at, so scenario D1 is with, so we asked RLS to add 10% total fertility rate and crude migration. So that's what that chart speaks to, correct?
And D1 and D3.
And we included the 10% in those 2 areas because of just unpredictability around projecting enrollment in future years.
Yes, and Park
Yes.
Central.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So Kathy, I know you definitely want to strike D2. I'm comfortable doing it based on this discussion. Katura, are you also comfortable doing that?
Yes.
Okay, so if I strike D2, then can we also agree then I can remove the asterisk that we added at the last meeting that talks about the 10% increase in fertility? And maybe Greg, you just weave that into the discussion of how these were based, because we obviously also reference people to the full report, which clearly outlines that was your methodology. Does that work?
Makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
And again, keep it simple, keep it really simple. We don't need to get in. People are going to go, what do you mean by fertility migration? So they've got the report and get into it. All you need to say is these are cushion numbers. We took RLS and we added cushion.
Okay.
Which actually makes me think, so, because on slide 10, we basically have the, oh, I see, 10% decrease. Gotcha. Okay, I was like, why does it say plus minus? And I forgot that the first section has the decrease. Okay.
Jason, then you should say that we don't need a D2. We don't need a D3, we need a D2. So change 3 to 2. I would think.
That's what I just did.
Okay.
They deleted 2, and now this is the scenario that we move forward with.
And I just want to ditto what Katura said. I think this is a beautifully done presentation, truly, from beginning to end. A+. And the only other thing I'd say, this is nitpicky, on the slide that's got next steps, which I think is 27. I had to go back and read it myself. That's why I'm saying you might want to clarify this. That last bullet where you say to work up funding scenarios of all in project costs, you're talking about the Woodward project cost, right? Not
Well-
the area project cost.
Well, I think it's everything. It's the cost of whatever we decide to do with Miri. It's the cost of whatever we decide to do with
Okay, all right, so
Woodward.
you do mean it. You do mean it. Okay, so I didn't think you meant it when I went down to that next bullet and you started talking about you'd be waiting for the near feasibility to come through. So I thought you really were just focused on the cost of basically getting Woodward ready for the town departments, but you're not. You're talking about the whole thing.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like, hey, you could still end up with a potential bump out on the library. And that's or the seniors end up potentially using some of that space, or what do you
Yeah.
have to do the townhouse, right? Like those are
Yes,
the things that are still in play that we haven't finalized.
I agree. So are you talking at the town side here when you say project cost, or are you talking about the whole thing, including NERI, when you say project cost?
Everything, school
Okay,
and
Then
town.
leave it, then leave it, it's fine.
And who's presenting this end section, recommendation and next steps? Jason, are you?
That's me, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
So I guess maybe let me just scroll through the slides just so we very quickly understand speaker roles. So I surmise Roger will open the meeting, do whatever he needs to do, Katura, and hand it to us. My plan would then be to just highlight the committee members, the agenda, and the background of where we have been. And then I will hand it to you and Greg to toggle through the enrollment data analysis as well as the charts. And you all can go through each of those slides as you see fit. I will then hand it to Kathy to talk about the work on the funding analysis. And then Kathy will turn it back to me on the recommendation and next steps. And then I think we would have some cadence of discussion around either Roger or I guess myself will direct the questions as they come in, not only from the school committee, but I also don't know how he plans to handle any audience sharing or public comment as part of this discussion. So I think that's the only question I would have is, just at the end, having someone kind of MC the feedback process and answer any questions.
I probably will recommend to Roger if he moves audience sharing after the presentation, because we open the meeting with audience sharing. What makes sense is to present and then open it up to audience sharing, so people actually will have something to comment about. But I'll speak with Roger on if that makes sense to him.
Okay. And I guess when you speak to him, just if he's going to direct the questions or if he wants us to direct who on our committee should try to at least answer. Obviously, we'll all have open mics to be able to address it as we see fit, but just obviously, I have no idea whether this is how well attended it is or isn't going to be. I know you've done a great job putting it in your newsletter, but you never know who's going to show up.
We'll expect many people.
Yes. Katura and Kathy, do you think it's appropriate to have a final vote on the presentation?
Couldn't hurt. And before we do it, can I ask 2 quick questions?
Sure.
Greg and Keith, am I correct in saying that the town of Southborough has never worked with the MSBA on a building project? I know we've done accelerated repair, Finn Bowler, et cetera, but we've never worked with the MSBA on a building project. I'm going to talk, I'm separating that from Algonquin. So in the town of Southborough, we have not. Is that correct? They were formed in 2004.
Yeah, that is not correct, Kathy. Just can you give me 1 second to confirm?
Okay.
Yeah, so the last renovation, which I believe was through MSBA, was for Mary E. Finn Elementary School in 2006.
Interesting. Okay, all righty. And then,
Kathy, I will send this link to you. I'll put it in the chat.
okay. And then the easy question is, how do we get into this meeting? Are we supposed to register?
Yeah, if you register for the meeting, and then I'll promote you as a panelist.
Okay.
There any other discussion on the presentation? So Greg, I will send you this in PDF format for you to post wherever you find appropriate. I'll also PDF Kathy's memo that we voted on at the last meeting for distribution. And then I don't think it would be appropriate for me to move to approve the presentation, given I drafted it. So I don't know if Kathy or Katura have a motion related to that.
I move that we accept the presentation with the changes just discussed at this meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Cook,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Is there any other business before we adjourn? All right, then I will move that we adjourn at 12:50 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Cook,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. See you
Okay.
at 6:30.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.